All right, thank you, everyone. And let me repeat myself. I would like to say welcome everyone to the second section of our webinar series. And we had a sweat time last week when we, had Dr. Chinedu Nwoye to talk to us about machine learning and its fundamentals. Today we are going to have we're going to do a new, we're going to have a new deep dive to data governance. And before I start, I would like to bring to the podium our director in the lab, in the person of Professor Collins Odano for, for a little short speech before we start. So, Professor, if you are available, could you please take over the microphone?
Thank you so much, Dr. Blessing Wukiri. Thank you. And welcome everyone once again to today's webinar. Last week was a blast. In fact, many of us are yet to recover from it. And I'm sure that this one is going to also be another great one. So once again, you're welcome to the HiPIC lab, the High Performance and Intelligence Computing Lab, based at the Department of Computer Science, University of Nigeria, Nsukka, Nigeria. The lab is a multidisciplinary lab. We work with people from different backgrounds. We are in the area of healthcare research, agriculture, and engineering, IoT, cloud computing, and of course, machine learning and AI. So you do well to visit our website at hipiclab.org so that you see more of what we do. And then we are also open to collaboration with people from any part of the world. So without saying much, I think I need to give the floor to our August speaker today to take us through this very important topic, data. Data is about everything. So let's hear him this evening. You're welcome. Thank you so much. Enjoy yourself.
All right. Thank you very much. Before we bring in the speaker for today, I would just like to pass this very short announcement. If you want to make a contribution, or if you have some concerns, or if you want to ask a question, you could actually put it in the chat box. Just type it in the chat box. You can also ask to, collaborate with the speaker. You can share your email or collect his email. All correspondence has to happen on the chat box while we are having the discussion. So without much ado, I'd like to introduce the speaker today. Our speaker today is Jeremiah OLAMIJUWON, who is an innovator, or is an innovative entrepreneur and tech advocate committed to driving positive change in Africa. With a track record of founding successful ventures, including FTIHUKU, Pty Limited, an AI consulting firm, and Conans Pty Limited, a fintech which is helping Africans to build credit history outside of their origin country. He leverages technology to empower entrepreneurs, foster innovation, and promote social impact. Jeremiah has embarked on various AI ventures, such as utilizing artificial intelligence for tracking missing persons, detecting disease through retinal imaging, and identifying early emotional breakdown on social media. He champions inclusive growth, advocating for policies that support entrepreneurship and collaborates with stakeholders to create a conducive ecosystem for businesses or business development. Through mentorship and capacity building, initiatives, he empowers the next generation of African entrepreneurs to thrive in the digital age. Ladies and gentlemen, I yield the floor to Jeremiah OLAMIJUWON, our speaker for today, data governance.
Thank you very much, Dr. Blessing. Hi, everyone. A lot has been said already about me, so I'm not going to, just say the same thing over. My name is Jeremiah OLAMIJUWON, the Group CEO of FTIHUKU, and it's my pleasure, of course, to share insights and knowledge today, especially because ethical AI is, there is no other time than to talk about it now. I mean, many of us actually have heard of the singularity, robots are going to take over the world. Many of us have actually, watched a lot of movies, a lot of films, about robots taking over the world. There was a joke sometime back that I was actually reading or something, watching, and they were like, you had better be nice to ChatGPT, Wall and Cloud and the likes, so that maybe in the next 10 years, when they take over the world or something, they can say, oh, you know what, yeah, Jerry was nice to us when he would ask questions, or he was polite. Let's just, let him be. But yeah, everyone actually has fears, but we can ensure that instead of having the fear of AI taking over the world, we could actually ensure that a lot of things are put in place such that basically that those fears are actually allayed, and also so that we can see more advancements and improvements in the field of artificial intelligence. So before I actually dive right in, right, I'm going to actually tell you a very quick story. And this is actually a true life story. It's actually about myself, and I would actually tell you where this leads, right? And basically, sometime in 2021, I wanted to buy. So I was venturing into an agri-tech, agriculture technology. We were trying to build some artificial intelligence systems that could detect when chickens are sick, when our livestock are sick, could actually help us track our livestock and all of that. So I wanted to buy a very big plot of land, and based on some of my previous experiences as well, with some of the other farms that I had bought, I actually observed something that certain lands that actually are in certain places tend to actually be prone more to theft and invasions and all of that. So when I wanted to buy this plot of land, based on my bias and my experiences, I was like, you know what, I'm only going to buy this plot of land in this particular region where there are, certain people that it actually, based on also some of the things that I actually read, I felt like it was safer, to actually buy there, especially because now I'll be deploying a whole lot of expensive infrastructure and also having a whole lot of our livestock, there. So basically, I bought the plot of land, but then obviously I wasn't living there because it was the manager that was going to actually be living there. And basically, they had actually added me to the group because I spoke to the chairman, and they had known Jerry. Whenever there's something to be done, I would sponsor, I would send. But then they didn't actually know exactly who Jeremiah was. So one of those days, I actually visited the plot, and I was walking by the neighborhood, and they actually were like, wait, we've not seen that guy before, but he looks like a thief. It looks like a cable thief. Okay, and basically, they came, harassed, and it actually was a whole lot of arguments and all of that. And eventually, I was like, do you guys want to say you don't know a certain Jeremiah? And they were like, no, you cannot be. That's Jeremiah. The kind of Jeremiah we're expecting is actually meant to be of this particular race. Obviously, it's an English name. It actually is meant to be some much older guy that is actually possibly richer. You actually seem to be, in your middle age. You still seem young. In fact, you don't actually seem like someone who could actually even afford a plot of land around here. Now, I want you to follow me, follow my story, and I want you to start picking out a lot of biases, in my story. Okay, so basically, eventually, we called the chairman and we're like, oh, Jeremiah, is that the same guy? And they were like, oh yes, that's Jeremiah. And then everyone was, surprised. Oh, we're sorry, we didn't know it's you and all of that, right? Now, that story ended. And then 6 months after, I took a certain family in the plot, one of the houses on the plot, to rent the plot. About 2-3 months after, they stopped paying rent. And then for like 9 months, they didn't pay the rent. And eventually I decided to evict them. Now, unfortunately, this family was also, let me say, belonging to a particular race. And I was like, you know what, based on my experience, I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to allow, anyone from this particular race to, stay in my plot because I don't want to repeat. So I decided to take someone else from a different race. And just 1 month after, that family broke into one of the other houses, stole my roofing sheets, building materials, and all of that. They didn't even spend more than 30 days. And eventually, I sat down and I understood something, that many a times our biases are not always right. Our biases actually make us to make certain decisions that could cause, even more disastrous, or that could bring more disastrous consequences. Okay. And I want you to imagine, basically, if this was how an artificial intelligence system was trained. Imagine putting the future of humanity in the hands of an artificial intelligence system that has been made to learn certain biases. I mean, it's logical, right? It's a machine. It's logical. It probably would not compromise. But then just imagine that basically it has learned certain biases that certain people of certain skin color, for example, are of this stereotype. Imagine basically taking all of that bias, and we actually have to leave maybe the rest of the world, for that. And that is actually why, again, like I said, there is no other time than to actually ensure that we put a lot of policies in place and make sure that, like, when we're developing artificial intelligence systems, there are ethics, things like fairness, equity, consideration, basically, and actually ensure that these things are put in place and also factored when we're building artificial intelligence system. Okay, so what exactly is ethical AI? Everyone is talking about ethical artificial intelligence. What exactly is it, right? And basically, we simply just say that ethical AI just refers to building and deploying AI systems that ensure that humans are at the center of that development, right? So we are not looking to build some machines that wants to destroy humanity. Instead, we want to build a system. We want to build something that can help humans. We don't want to create a competition. We want to create a collaboration. We want to create some sort of fusion between the physical world and the digital world, right? Such that the digital world is actually helping us, to even achieve greater things in the world. So again, here I did mention fairness, transparency, and accountability. Also, I did put here to say ethical AI ensures that artificial intelligence operates without causing harm to people, right? Or even violating human rights. Okay, so, okay, we've talked about, okay, so this is what ethical AI is about. But why exactly do we even need to care about it? I mean, you can actually just put a few things in place. You would have actually seen from, maybe you've watched many movies, and you would have seen that many times when new technology are built, generally by human nature, certain people want to always profit from it. And we can actually see that the future of artificial intelligence brings or promises a whole lot that could bring about drastic consequences or could change the future of humanity for good, right? And basically, one of the reasons why we are emphasizing on ethical artificial intelligence is, one, we need to ensure that AI systems that we build prevent bias and discrimination. We need to ensure that when we're building these AI systems, we need to ensure that we reduce or probably eliminate as much as is possible bias and discrimination. if you've actually been following the trend of artificial intelligence, you would actually have seen that there was a story of certain people belonging to certain demography being hired, right? And that's basically because the kind of training data, for example, that artificial intelligence or the system has been exposed to. Now, let me just mention this, right? Machine learning seems to be that branch of artificial intelligence that has had the most significant breakthrough, in the past years and all. Like, there are other forms as well, but basically the way machine learning works is it learns from vast amount of data. And if the data we're providing it, right, even though it may actually simulate the real world, for example, one would actually argue that in the hospitality industry, you may actually tend to find more females, right? And then maybe, for example, in professions or career that require more physical labor, you may actually find men. But again, if you actually then start looking at other careers, even though it may not be dependent on gender, you may actually find out that based on historical patterns and based on how the society has actually laid certain things, you'll find out that you may actually find more men in certain fields, not necessarily because there can't be women there. In fact, there are women there, they're just few. So basically, when you take that data and then you expose artificial intelligence to it, because it learns from that data, it assumes that this is basically the representation of the world and this is how it has to be. So we need to actually then ensure that we guide the artificial intelligence system to ensure that it doesn't take that existing bias. Instead, we're trying to actually make it better and create, a better future. Okay, so that's one. And then another thing as well is, if we must all adopt artificial intelligence, it is very important that we are able to convince people that artificial intelligence is safe. I'm sure many of you, for example, would actually walk into the hospital and basically you just check in and they say a machine would basically be the only thing that would conduct a surgery on you. Many of you will probably be like, no, you know what? I can't do this, right? I need, even though I know about artificial intelligence and I love artificial intelligence and I want to see the breakthrough, right? But I would rather prefer that someone is monitoring it, because at the end of the day, I cannot hold the machine accountable. Sometimes, like, if you've actually always been watching science fiction, you've been watching artificial intelligence movies, you would actually see that, like, I can't remember the title of the movie now. It actually says that even though the machine actually did a whole lot of wrong, killed someone and all, it cannot be held responsible because it's basically just a machine. It's an accident, right? The same way, for example, you operate a blender and somehow you cut your hand, right? It's just an accident. So if we cannot then trust artificial intelligence, it basically means that we would actually have more people drawing away from allowing artificial intelligence in their lives. So if we must actually see more advancement in artificial intelligence, public trust cannot be overemphasized. So when we're building artificial intelligence systems, we need to actually let people know that this is transparent. Even when there are certain decisions that are made, there is a reason why it has arrived at that decision, and that reasoning is actually permissible, it's reasonable, we can actually accommodate it, right? The fact that, for example, and I would actually mention that instance in a short while, the fact that this is a logical thing to do doesn't necessarily mean it is permissible. Say, for example, in certain countries, euthanasia, that's mercy killing, for example, is allowed. But in some other countries, it is not allowed. Now, you as a human being may say, oh, you know what? This person's chance of survival is very limited and they probably may not survive, but they're in pains, right? And you consider that a logical thing to do is to kill or is to actually euthanize the person. But again, the law actually says euthanasia is not allowed. So basically, we need to actually like find, even though it may be the logical thing to do, is it legal? Is it lawful? Right? And we need to actually be able to then convince the public, right, that artificial intelligence system is going to abide by the law and not just by what it actually thinks is right. And that is actually what guides the society as a whole. Another thing also why ethical AI actually matters is we need to be able to ensure that your rights are not violated. I mean, many of us, want to assert our rights, especially you stopped by the cops, you have your driver's license and everything. And basically the cop actually is like, calm down. I do actually watch a couple of, I do watch some videos on YouTube where certain Americans will assert their right. They'll be like, no, you need to give me a reasonable, well-articulated, something like reasonable suspicion that made you stop me, right? Otherwise, you cannot ask for my identity. Now, that is basically a human being asserting their rights, right? And actually ensuring that their rights are not abused. Or basically, when you go on websites and you have to click on I agree, if you reject, maybe you're not allowed access, or basically you really still allowed access, but then you still have the option to say, I do not agree with your terms and conditions. But imagine that for a system to function, it really needs to be exposed to vast amount of data, which basically means you almost don't have a choice. And that's actually why in building artificial intelligence systems, we need to actually be able to say that people have a choice to say, I want my data trained on. There's actually been a whole lot of controversy in the world of AI in the past, actually even decades, but much more recently, even in the past 10 years, where, for example, you have generative AI and they were trained on artists' intellectual property. And the thing is, there is now this artificial intelligence system that can generate art. But then the people who are responsible for drawing those things are saying, we are not compensated for this. We did not consent to this, right? And this is where ethical AI actually comes in, right? To say, how can we find a compromise? How can we find a balance to say, we want to have advancements in the field of artificial intelligence with regards to generative AI or to be able to generate content, and still we are only exposing the data that we are allowed to access. We've actually gotten into, we actually are in the world where there is almost no privacy. The only reason why there is some degree of privacy is basically because there's some sort of deterrent. There is some sort of consequence for an organization not handling your data well. But if it's an artificial intelligence system, who are you going to sue? Even though you sue the organization can say, this is an artificial intelligence system that came to a decision by itself. It was not within our control. And again, that's why we need to actually have all these policies in place to say, well, maybe if you had put policies and checks in place before this system was deployed, maybe we wouldn't be sitting where we're sitting right now. Okay, and then lastly, why does it matter? When you look at the history of the world, life has never been fair. There has always been power imbalance, right? In Africa, even in other continents as well. There has actually always been, some would say conspiracy theories as well, but there has always been, so much power imbalance, a whole lot of diverse theories, a whole lot of perception. For example, racism may still be a reality, even though we may have come a very long way, at least from far back as, let's say, 30 years ago. Even in South Africa, we've made a lot of progress. But then, if we're going to expose artificial intelligence, remember, this is a system that needs to be exposed to vast amount of data. So if we're going to expose the history of the world to it without supervision, you can actually expect artificial intelligence to replicate exactly what actually has happened. And in this case, it's not going to be because it has not learned from history. In fact, that quote would be the exact reverse. The quote that says, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. In this case, artificial intelligence has learned the history and it is going to replicate it because that is what it knows. And think about it. How did we actually come to this point where we are now, where basically people are now mindful, of other people, of other people's race, people's gender, people's sexuality, and a whole lot of things? Why have we come so far to respect many of these things? It's basically because there are certain policies that have now been in place. For example, sexism used to be a norm. Violence used to be a norm. Sexual violence used to be a norm in certain places, especially in marriages as well, right? But basically, over time, we've actually refined. We've refined humanity. We've refined our perception. We've come to actually understand that no, you know what? The fact that like someone's skin color, for example, or someone actually has higher higher amounts of melanin, for example, doesn't necessarily mean they are inferior. And then we start understanding that and we start accepting that reality. And that is actually what ethical AI also does for artificial intelligence, right? Because when you teach it the stereotypes without that guidance to say, even though this is actually the history of the world, this is actually wrong, right? Even though, for example, people were taken, for example, at the island of Gori in Senegal, and they were actually like sent to America as slaves, and some of them were thrown. It doesn't mean that this is actually the right thing. In fact, it actually is wrong. And this is actually where ethical AI actually like stands to say, we want to guide artificial intelligence system such that they put humanity in mind, but not just putting humanity in mind, putting fairness to everyone. Also ensuring that everyone is actually included, having a view of diversity and inclusion. Because in the real sense of it, when you have that sense of accommodation is where you actually learn to, to treat other people with more consideration, basically. All right, so what have we been struggling with regards to artificial intelligence? What exactly are the challenges which we're facing? Again, these are basically off of what I've actually even said earlier. But one of the major challenges we've actually faced over time with artificial intelligence is the bias and discrimination. Some of you who have been following the trends in artificial intelligence, and this seems to actually happen, well, which is not so surprising in some of the, let me say, advanced or developed countries. I could remember some time back, a couple of years ago, probably over a decade now, I could remember that there was a system that detected a Black person, for example, as a gorilla or something like that, right? And it was very offensive. But again, it's not because the AI chooses to be, or it's not because the AI chose to be racist. It's simply because internally, when it makes its decision, there is some sort of confidence score, and its confidence score actually says, based on many of the features I see, for example, the melanin tone, maybe, for example, the presence of air, maybe the shape of the face as well, and some other things. It seems more similar, for example, to this other image which I was trained on. And then basically it actually made that decision. But again, I wouldn't be surprised, because when you look at some of those countries, you would actually find that the data they could have gathered would have contained more lighter skinned people who were labeled as humans, right? And then everyone can get pictures of gorilla anywhere, right? But also there were like maybe fewer images of, darker skinned people. And basically because it actually learned more that humans tend to actually have lighter skin tones, and baboons or apes or whatever actually tend to actually have very dark skin tone. But you see, if there were like maybe more images of, let's say, dark-skinned people that also were labeled as humans, maybe its confidence score would have actually increased a lot more and actually said, this is actually a human being, right? But again, that actually may not seem to have had a whole lot of drastic consequence other than the fact that it perpetuates racism and, it's offensive. But imagine that basically you apply to a job, and just for the fact that this is an artificial intelligence role, maybe machine learning developer role, but also we've actually found that there are way more men in artificial intelligence or building artificial intelligence algorithms. In fact, many a times we tend to see more men and actually like forget that there are some other female machine learning developers that are building the algorithm. For example, OpenAI actually has the CTO now is a Mira. And basically, nobody actually knows that. Everyone knows Sam Altman, everyone knows Greg as well. And you would actually find out that the AI actually thinks that, you know what, it seems that like generally, for a machine learning development role, I should actually accept a man because that's the kind of people I've been seeing doing machine learning, right? And it's the same way we all have our stereotypes. Right? It's the same way we actually learn from our environment. And only if we actually have that guidance, that mentorship to put us in the right line, to put us in check, right? And then we start actually like learning that, oh, you know what, this is actually wrong. And basically, we've actually had instances where I could remember as well, someone was actually telling me that, oh, you guys look alike. So for example, and I've been guilty of this as well, where I saw two Asian people, and I thought they looked alike. And I can tell you that's very offensive. You wouldn't know it's very annoying when until basically you're dark skinned and maybe you are like in Europe where there are way more lighter skinned people, and then they actually like mistake you for someone else. And unfortunately, the person they even mistake you for probably is some sort of criminal. And then you actually start understanding that this can be very drastic, right? So we've actually had instances of that where I think it was in the USA, someone was wrongly arrested, and it was a dark-skinned person, wrongly arrested because they looked like the criminal, like some other person who stole, right? And you would actually find that facial recognition systems in the past actually tend to actually like perform better on lighter-skinned people. I think a lot of improvement has been done over time, but I think there's still a whole lot of more work that also still needs to be done. Another thing also, another challenge which we actually have, privacy concerns. And one thing I love about the field of machine learning, for the fact that people are putting ethics, in mind, there have been a whole lot of ways to say, how can we still have advancements in the field of artificial intelligence and still protect people's data? And we actually have something we call federated learning, right? To say, instead of us collecting your data and training our model on your vast amount of data, right? Maybe we could actually consider an approach where we bring the model to your data, right? Such that, for example, you have your phone. One way would have been, or let me say the conventional way before federated learning was that as you type and we get your keystrokes, we log your keystrokes, and then we actually are pushing that data to the cloud as long as you're connected, right? And basically, we can see every single thing you've ever typed. We can see, even though we don't check your emails, but since you typed it through your phone, for example, we can actually like see those words. We can put them together, right? And you actually feel violated because you didn't consent to this. So then some people came up with federated learning to say, how about we take the model closer to the data instead of bringing the data closer to the model, right? So they basically deploy the model and let the model just learn on the data. And once the model has learned on the data, it actually gets the experience, which may not be easily reconstructible, right? So for example, some of you who have done facial recognition system, you would understand that the way facial recognition works is that it generates some sort of embeddings on your face. Some could be 68 embeddings or 124 or like some other amount of vectors. It's basically the representation of your face, but you may not be able to construct or reconstruct a face based on those embeddings. And when I say embeddings, and there are different ways, think about it, for example, maybe the distance of my forehead to my chin, maybe the distance between my two noses, maybe, for example, the dilation of my eyes and, a whole lot of other things, basically. Even though we can get somewhat how the face looks like, we cannot directly reproduce that face exactly. And that's actually one of the advancements in machine learning. And think of surveillance systems. Think of if, for example, your data was leaked. Nobody actually wants that, right? Nobody actually wants to feel monitored and knowing that like anybody, for example, can hack the system and basically actually like know where I am at any point in time. Another thing also is transparency and accountability. Now, one of the challenges which we have in machine learning, especially deep neural networks, is that it abstracts its decisions. So even though it gives you this very nice accuracy or very nice performance, but then we can't really understand how did it arrive at this decision. Imagine that basically I want to give out 100,000 Rand and I select 10 people from this call right now. And I say, I'm giving you all because you are deserving of it. Now, if you know you're right, you'd be like, we attended at the same time. In fact, I joined earlier than this person. How did you arrive at that decision? What made you say this is the amount you're going to give to this person, right? And basically you raise questions.
Just a moment, just a quick one. We have 20 minutes to round up. So if you could quickly, go towards the data governance aspect so that people can understand these things in terms of data governance, that will be right, so that we don't spend much of our time on ethical part of the AI. You can go ahead, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So basically I've actually like spoken about transparency and then autonomy as well, and also the ethical use of AI in society. So I'm just going to skip that and get into governance and the frameworks, the guidelines and the principles for ethical AI. And basically, again, and this is basically all I have been saying as well. It all leads to this point, right? And the first is basically fairness. In building AI systems, you need to ensure that AI systems are designed in such a way that it is inclusive, right? It doesn't perpetuate any bias or discrimination. It actually ensures that like everyone is treated the same way, regardless of their demography, their social economic backgrounds, and all of that. Another thing also is that it needs to be transparent. Basically in the field of artificial intelligence, we've actually had certain model that actually helps towards this. For example, for credit scoring, there is an algorithm called Lime. And then there's another one also which is called Sharp, for example, which attempts to actually understand the decision of an artificial intelligence system to say what exactly was it looking at when it actually made this decision. Another thing also is accountability. And basically, you would have machine learning developers or machine learning engineers who are building this artificial intelligence system. But we need to ensure that when you're deploying this artificial intelligence system, we can hold an organization responsible or accountable. As much as sometimes you may actually have some arbitrary decisions made by artificial intelligence systems, it is important to know that an organization has actually put everything in place, right? And this is, again, where we talk about data governance, right? To say, what exactly is in place for data privacy? And you would actually see that there's been a whole lot of laws and acts. For example, POPI Act, the Protection of Personal Information Act is one, right? So even if there was any leak or any privacy violation, the question is, what did the organization do to actually ensure that this did not happen, right? If there was reasonable efforts, maybe there could be less penalties. But then if there was no such thing that was put in place, and this is actually for many machine learning engineers, right? If, for example, when you were collecting data, did you actually ensure that this data is not biased, right? It's not just enough to actually say, I just got a sample size that is reflective of the economy necessarily. The question is, did you factor in fairness as well? Did you actually factor in the fact that this model may be biased against people, for example, from lower classes as well? Another thing also is privacy and security. And many of you would have actually seen that if you actually like watch a whole lot of many of these big companies being called, for example, you'll see maybe Mark Zuckerberg or maybe it's Elon Musk, you know, being actually like called, you know, and being queried as to say, on Facebook, you actually matched a minor to an adult in such a way that they could be friends. And eventually you perpetuated or you enabled crime, basically, even though it was your artificial intelligence system that actually you know, made this recommendation. But the question is, what did you put in place? And this is all we're talking about data governance. And these are frameworks, right, to actually ensure that we can create, you know, a safe world, right? And basically, one of the things you could actually do, and many of you who have interacted with maybe large language models like ChatGPT, you would actually see, for example, there is a feedback mechanism, right? To say, this thing actually like gave a wrong answer, or it gave an offensive answer. And by reporting that, you as an organization or as a developer need to be able to have mechanisms in place to actually ensure that those things are corrected as soon as possible or immediately. It is very important, like I said, to actually ensure that when you collect data, it is collected in a very safe way. I'm sure you already have been exposed to the fact that, you know, people need to consent to collecting data and a whole lot of other things. But when you collect the data, you're processing the data, what measures are you putting in place? Things even as simple as changing your passwords, using strong passwords are all part of data governance. You need to actually ensure that you've done everything as much as is possible to protect data. That does not necessarily mean people, or that does not necessarily mean that things won't happen. For example, your systems may be hacked, maybe through some sort of social engineering, but have you put some of these policies in place? And also, I think lastly here, I do have a human-centric design, right? To say, when you build an artificial intelligence system, it is important that the human being is at the center of it. Does it benefit humans or does it destroy humanity? For example, there have actually been situations where people actually want to build robots for war, right? And of course, having some of these policies in place actually help to hold such people accountable. Not exactly that follow it. I believe there are a whole lot of people who actually are into arms deals and all of that. But I do have your practical approaches to implementing ethical artificial intelligence. And the first is basically, which I did mention a couple of minutes ago, reviews in during the course of your development, right? As an organization, you need to have audits in place. So we don't need to actually have the House or the Senate, you know, calling you for hearings. You need to actually like set up some boards to actually like review, you know, some of the decisions or basically the performance of your machine learning systems. Also, it is very important to put in place diverse teams. The reality is many people are fighting for their kind. So if, for example, you see that this machine learning system is going to perpetuate certain unfair stereotypes about someone like me, you actually can easily quickly raise alarm, and that can actually help quite a lot. And also continuous monitoring and auditing, which again speaks to the very first thing there, to say it shouldn't just be done once. The artificial intelligence system would likely continue to learn and to actually like, you know, innovate by itself and all of that. It is very important that you actually like keep intermittently or periodically review and audit your artificial intelligence systems. And also, basically here, I actually just have 3 points, which is, again, 1, have a diverse team of developers, ethicists, review boards, ensure that basically your AI system abides by certain policies, fairness, privacy, and inclusivity. And lastly, if you could actually like follow Microsoft's example, Microsoft's Ether, which is the AI Ethics and Engineering Research Committee, to ensure that when you're building machine learning systems, you have independent people, in fact, preferably people who don't necessarily understand artificial intelligence, all they basically are just focused on is that would I want this system to make decisions for my family or my kind, for example? Do I think it actually like contributes to humanity or destroys humanity rather in the future? I did mention SHARP and LIME, local interpretable model agnostic explanations and shapely additive explanations. These are explainable artificial intelligence. You may have heard of them. There are many other algorithms out there, like even Any5, explain to me like I'm 5. These are all now artificial intelligence models that you're building to actually try to understand. And many banks, especially that I know in South Africa, are putting this in place already. We've actually consulted for a number of them, and they're ensuring that if you're going to build a machine learning algorithm for us that actually makes a decision, it needs to be explainable. And again, this actually like forms part of the data governance team. When you actually like deploy a model and all of that, before it goes into production or before it goes live, it actually goes to the data governance team, and basically they actually want to understand every single thing that actually makes the AI system arrive at that decision. Just because we don't have a lot of time and I want to give room for questions and answers as well. I also do have one point here to say, keep human in the loop and clear usage policies. I will share the slides, just after. And lastly here, it's a call to action, right? To say, as much as we don't want to stifle innovation, innovate responsibly, right? It's not just about having fancy ideas. It's about building something that actually contributes to the progress of humanity. Another thing also, call to action for many of you is, join ethical AI communities. There's a huge fight between mega corporates and certain people who actually are fighting for ethical AI because corporates want to make their money, right? So the more people we actually have in ethical AI committees, also fighting for ethical guidelines and policies to be put in place, the better world we actually make. Also, in your organization, encourage ethical AI practices and educate and raise awareness. Basically, lastly here, I have that ethical AI is a shared responsibility, right? And together we can create a future where, basically artificial intelligence serves everyone equally and ethically. Thank you very much. You can connect with me on my LinkedIn, Jeremiah OLAMIJUWON. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeremiah, and what an insightful presentation. While we are waiting for the questions, Mary, you can take a snapshot of this screen as it is, where we have everyone on the screen. If you can, those who are willing to put on their cameras so that we can have a photo together that we can use to put on our social media handles. So if you are here and you want to put on your camera to do that, you can do that. You can also take screenshots on your own side. I will have like 2 pages right now. Okay, so while we're doing that, you can put in your questions on the chat box. Jerry, I have a question for you in regards to data collection and privacy. Are there some best practices of data collection and some effective data collection strategies that we can, in terms of designing the data collection process? So 2 questions. Number 1 is best practices for data collection and how we can design effective data collection strategies. If I remember, when you go to some localities, people, they just come, tech industries collect people's data without informing them. We had cases with Facebook taking people's data to, build models without their consent and all that. So are there some data collection strategy you can actually share with us?
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. Basically, I mean, many people already are doing this, especially people in research, and especially when you have to apply for ethical clearance. I do think that this needs to be enforced as well, in industry, as much as there is the law, there, but I just think it needs to be, enforced more. But yes, in terms of best practices, number one is consent, right? People need to consent to their data being used. And then, as much as this is difficult, right? Many a times you actually give consent. And that's basically because you don't have a choice. So for example, you just want to like sign up, you just want to sign up on me, for example, for Facebook and all. And then you see this daunting 5-page document about terms and conditions. And then you just say, I accept. So I think part of the things which needs to be done really is to make what people are signing up for as simple as possible, so that people can actually really know exactly what they're really signing up for. Another thing also is that you should have the choice to say you reject the terms and conditions and not be penalized for that. Otherwise, basically, it's more like a blackmail. You're really being untwisted. You have no choice, really. Those are some of the things which I would actually like really say. Another thing also is in collecting data, of course, you need to put a whole lot of things, in place, like, the privacy and the security of the data. Some organizations actually have this policy where, for example, data does not leave their system. If you actually have drives, for example, they are notified. And I know this actually happens a lot in the banking space. So yeah, those are some of the things which I would really mention to say, maybe an organization should really put in place when collecting data. Again, there are different forms of data which you can collect, structured and unstructured data. But at the end of the day, I think the really most important thing is the user really knows that they are giving you access to this data, and you are only using the data for what they actually consented it to be used for. So basically, you don't collect my face to do face recognition for personalized system, and suddenly now it's you actually like using it to catch criminals, and then basically you're reporting me to the authorities, for example. As much as that is very important, let me actually like agree to that. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Jerry. I don't know if we have any other question here. Let me check the. Do we have any other? Professor Odaro, are you there? Could you share the photo for the next speaker so that people can know what we expected next time? Is Prof there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm there.
Do we have any other question from the audience?
Looks like Tebo says they need some sort of advice.
Okay, so yes, there's a question here from Arinze Uchechukwu. It says, thank you for the presentation. In the light of data breach like Cambridge Analytical scandal and strengthening data governance using frameworks like GDPR, what's your take on responsible AI?
So I mean, I do actually like agree with those policies, and I think some of those acts, I think the GDPR, I think is very similar to your POPI Act as well in South Africa, but basically, after some of those data breaches and some of those situations where people's data actually have been exposed. There were quite, some laws that actually were rolled out. POPI, GDPR actually been some of them. And basically that's actually made organizations sit tight. If you've actually observed some trends in the industry, you would actually find that as an employee, you're required to change your password, for example, every 3 months. Or in some organizations, maybe like every 6 months, right? Many of the times, data breaches as a result of social engineering. So which means that someone was actually just careless. And then actually like through that person, basically organization data in the organization was was accessed. And that's basically why you would actually then find organizations putting more responsibility more on their side than the employee side to actually say, we are the ones who will be fined. So I do totally agree with the GDPR policies, the POPI Act, and I strongly do as well, because it makes organizations sit tight. At the end of the day, it's going to be an employee who is just fired. But then so many other lives could actually be, at risk. So when there's heavy penalties for the organization themselves, I think it actually helps, much more. And there's a whole lot of things actually that also have been put in place. For example, some countries, for example, are actually ensuring that data sits within their countries or sometimes in their continent. So for example, in the USA, for example, you cannot take a USA data outside of the United States. It needs to sit within the United States. And the reason is basically because they then know that their policies, and when you're being sued and all of that, the policies actually apply directly to you and not where the data is being stored.
All right. Thank you very much, Jerry, for that insightful feedback. I'm going to read another question for you right now. Someone is asking, I have two questions for you actually. Okay, so this is a follow-up question again from Uchechu. We say, what is the role of accountability, explainability, transparency, and integrity towards enhancing ethical AI? Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, do you want me to answer that already? I thought you still reading the second one.
Yeah, I think I will skip this question. So Mankova from South Africa is asking, hi, Jerry, is there any example out there of an explainable AI system? I think you mentioned that in your slide where you talked about Sharp and Line, but you can answer the question actually.
Yes, so there is also LE5 as well. And then there are also, some other ones that actually, are now focused, in understanding the deep neural networks, as well. But otherwise, we don't also have to build this very super complex artificial intelligence systems. One of the things which I'm very familiar with, especially in the banking industry, is that they'd rather even prefer you to use something as simple as an XGBoost. It is fairly decent in terms of performance, right? But it is very explainable because it's almost like a tree model. It's actually a tree model, basically. So we can actually see how it arrived at its decision. But I also understand that we want to actually we don't want to be restricted to just tree models, or some simple models. We want better performance, and there are actually a lot of explainable models out there. I already explained Lime, which basically, it's you kind of like creating another linear model that actually kind of simulates the prediction of the model on some other synthetic data that was generated around it. Now you can just read up on Lime and also Shapley additive algorithms as well. Shapley additive explanations. You can also read up on that as well. There's LE5 explained like I'm 5, and there's a whole lot of other ones as well, which I may be able to share maybe in the future or maybe in the slides. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Just the last question. Kaiji Chen is asking, he says, thank you for, said, hi, thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question. How do we introduce and spread the use of AI to the less educated masses to increase the forces of production, especially to people from global south, while also, making sure ethicalness of use of AI. Okay, so this person is asking, just in a nutshell, how you will, educate people in the less, or rather, how would you pass this AI, this whole knowledge about AI into the less educated masses, and increase forces, especially in the global south?
So generally, the first thing, right, is to simplify how machine learning works to the less educated masses. And basically, many of the times when I teach machine learning and artificial intelligence, I actually just try to make them understand that it's the same way you learn from experiences, right? All machine learning is just doing is it's saying that, you know what, Jerry actually has some beards, right? And maybe, for example, his voice is another feature which seem to be maybe like deep or something. And maybe, for example, the shape of his head is like this. He actually has an ear, for example, and all. And it tries to look at all of these patterns to make a decision, right? So you basically simplifying how machine learning works helps the masses or the less educated masses, to adopt it and actually like trust it even better, right? But again, all of these things we are saying, the less educated masses would adopt artificial intelligence if they feel they can trust it. And the only way they can feel they can trust it is the same way you can feel you can trust someone if you know how they make their decisions. If you know that basically their decisions have already factored you in mind, and you know that also you can query it, you can contest its decision, and it can explain to you how it arrived at that decision. Another thing also really, and again, I put that in the call to action to say, everybody actually needs to go out there and sensitize people about artificial intelligence, and also try to take people away from this whole general artificial intelligence that actually knows everything in the world. Rather, we need to actually make them understand that, maybe that actually may happen decades from now or centuries from now, but right now, artificial intelligence is only a way just to, help you, perform better, increases costs of production, like you mentioned. So I do think the more responsibility lies with people like yourself and myself who actually understand machine learning and can simplify it to people, and also make them know that there's a whole lot of people like us who are trying to ensure that there are policies and guidelines in place, and we're holding people accountable and responsible.
All right, thank you very much. This is very insightful. And thank you everyone for coming today. Just in addition, you don't really need formal education per se to be a machine learning developer or to code. I mean, we have people in China who do not speak English that build very sophisticated machine learning models. So it's not really about formal education like classroom education. It's actually about training in terms of practice of learning how to program and all that. While we want to thank all of you for coming today and thank our speaker for today, I want you to mark your calendar for next week, Friday, same time, same link. We're going to be talking about responsible AI and ethical considerations. This is an opportunity for you to also come and learn how to build responsible AI and how we can learn and collaborate in that aspect. On behalf of the team from the HiPIC Lab and all of us that are organizing the workshop at the seminar, the webinar series, I want to say thank you very much for coming, and we wish you all the best of luck. If you want to privately talk to or collaborate with the speaker, please do well to contact the speaker via his email. The recorded version of this talk is going to be available to us, and it will be sent to us via our email. And from all of us, to say thank you and see you next week.
Thank you.